Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Just Work podcast. I'm Kim Scott, and
I'm Wesley Faulkner, her co host for the Just Work podcast. I'm a developer relations professional and also a community manager. And Kim, what do you do?
I am soon to be a paperback writer, which I'm very
Hey,
excited about. Um, and
maybe you'll
we,
write the front as well.
that's right. That's right. The paper front and the paperback. And we are going to read, or I'm going to read, and then we're going to talk about a page from the upcoming Just Work paperback and talk about it. And then Wesley has a story, and we're going to use some of the stuff we read to talk about it, or maybe we're just going to talk. So we'll see what happens. Ready?
Yes, let's do it.
All right, let's do it. So this section follows the previous section from the previous podcast, and it is called How Do We Get These Problems Out of the Way? A framework, or if you prefer, a taxonomy. This book offers a framework for thinking about how to match different solutions to different problems. You can also think of it as a taxonomy. It's a way to parse the different toxic behaviors that will destroy your team's ability to collaborate. Okay, I'm going to pause right there. Too corny? What do you think, Wesley? You like taxonomy or don't like taxonomy?
I love it. It
Oh,
will
good.
never get old. You say it all the time. I think it's going to be my new word that I'll try to work into conversations from here on out.
It's because it's useful when you're furious to try to parse the problem as a way of sort of managing one's own emotions. At
Yes,
least,
and sorry, I don't want to devolve too much, but someone said on Blue Sky, I was on Blue Sky, and someone says that their wife just coined a new term saying, "I'm in a shituation," uh, and it sounds exactly the same way. Like the words describe
yes.
exactly everything you need to know.
Okay, situation. I'm going to work that into this book too. All right. Frameworks don't claim to fix everything. Rather, they serve as a tool that can help us break a problem down so we can stay oriented as we begin to work on it. For example, Michael Porter's Five Forces framework helps leaders identify the key strategic forces at play in their industry. The framework doesn't promise instant sustainable competitive advantage, but it can help you identify and manage the competitive dynamics in your industry. It helps managers differentiate between pressures from competitors, new entrants, suppliers, customers, and substitute products. This seems obvious, but in the heat of the moment, it's easy to conflate different pressures from different sources or to blame everything on just one of the five forces. Here is the framework that will help you stay oriented as you confront different situations that may feel bewildering. Bias, prejudice, bullying, discrimination, harassment, physical violation. So, since this is a book that I'm reading from and this is a visual, this is imagine these words horizontally, and there's a little lightning bolt between bullying and discrimination to indicate that that's what happens when power enters the equation. The next few posts will help you identify the attitudes and distinguish between these different behaviors, each of which will threaten to move your organization away from collaboration and respect. For each, I will offer some ideas for how to get things back on track. Subsequent posts will also go into more detail about the different ways you can apply this framework depending on whether you are an observer, the person harmed, the person causing harm, or the leader. Changing these attitudes and behaviors, many of which are deeply ingrained, will demand that you are both patient and persistent with yourself and others. You must extend grace as you hold others and yourself accountable for doing better. You don't have to achieve perfection in order to take a step in the right direction, and that can give you the optimism you need to take the next step. The radical respect framework will help you figure out whether you are dealing with bias, prejudice, or bullying and what to do about it. All right. So I think that's enough reading for today. So the idea is that there's one taxonomy, this bias, prejudice, bullying, discrimination, harassment, physical violations. And then for the first part of the taxonomy, there's one framework that helps you know how to deal with bias, prejudice, and bullying. And for the second part of the taxonomy, discrimination, harassment, and physical violations, there is a second framework. The fact that I had to explain
Mhm.
that indicates to me that I need to go back and do some editing. But
Well, this is
anyway,
also like, this is will be unfurled.
yes.
These are in stages, so I think it's chopped up very nicely.
Okay, good. And what do you think about having a couple of different frameworks? One for the first part of the taxonomy where power doesn't enter into things, and one for the second half where power does enter into things.
I think the separation is very good. The reason for that is because um, my frantic anxiety self is way different than my calm self,
Yeah,
and having a strategy when you're calm and knowing what to grasp for when you're not, when you're full, like you're in the moment, it's good to know. I don't even know how to deal with this right now, but then I do know that there is a framework, and
yeah,
having a cheat sheet or some sort of crib notes about
yeah,
how to process that or how to go through that is so useful, to be able to make sure that you at least do the work when you're calm, so that when you're in that place where you actually need to use it, that you can at least practice like a muscle and be able to revert to the thing or the structure that can help you get through that.
yeah, yeah. And you, a couple of weeks ago, Wesley, you had a situation, and and it was infuriating. I don't mean to make light of it, but sometimes I don't know. We have all. We should do a whole podcast on humor, but because I think I sometimes I tend to revert to humor when things are uncomfortable instead of like admitting how horrible. But you had a really crappy thing happen to you, and you dealt with it. You were a steady and calm, in a way that left me sort of flabbergasted and with admiration for you. So why don't you tell folks what happened, and then we can talk about it, and we can sort of figure out which part of the taxonomy was present and why.
Sure, sure. By the way, just talking about the calm piece, I shared it with someone else, a recording of what happened, and they said the same things. Like, I don't see how you you were that calm in that situation, but unfortunately or fortunately, I had a lot of practice
Yeah.
throughout my life. But a little bit of a backstory that leads into the situation of why that was so pivotal or so impactful at the time. I my family lived in Eau Claire, Wisconsin. We moved there from Austin, Texas, because my father-in-law was diagnosed with a terminal illness. And so we moved there to spend his last days during the pandemic. Unfortunately, he passed away. And being in that space, there were some issues with race that a lot of people didn't deal with there, and so they're really insensitive around that subject when you tried to talk to them. And I was used to it, but my kids were not. So
In
they
Texas.
in Eau Claire,
Eau Claire. Okay.
in Wisconsin, my kids were not used to dealing with the kind of let's just say racially charged language or actions
Yeah.
that happened while we were there. I'm not going to call people racist because I don't know what's in their heart, but I can tell that their actions were extremely harmful for my kids. And so,
Yeah.
um,
So you
my
weren't going to move
sis,
back there.
so we were not moving back there. We are finding
Yeah.
another place to live. And so, we moved to Texas to be neighbors with my sister, who has three lovely kids that are
Hmm.
around the same age as my kids, as a way of healing and kind of like detoxing
Yeah.
from the state that they're in Eau Claire. And so we were there, and unfortunately, the place that we lived had some health issues. Like I don't know if it was mold or the 3 pack a day smokers that lived there before us, but
Ugh.
we were not having good uh, respiratory issues while we were there. We were having a lot of sickness in different ways of way it was manifesting us. And the landlord told us that they weren't basically going to address it and for us to move out. So we
Wow.
had to find a new place to live. And so um, we found a place here. Eventually, we're in Roanoke, Wisconsin, and it'll make sense. I'll tell you why this is important to the story. I'm getting there, and I won't
Wait,
take too much more time.
You're in
Roanoke,
Roanoke,
Virginia. Virginia.
Virginia.
Sorry,
Okay.
I think I said Wisconsin. Sorry, Roanoke, Virginia. So we moved to Roanoke, Virginia, because it checked all the boxes that we're looking for in terms of what we wanted in a place to live. So we had to move out of our place in Texas,
Hmm.
pack up in a car. We went back to Eau Claire to sell our house, and so we're just in town for the paperwork. So
Mm-hmm.
we are crammed in a Prius.
So it's
Uh,
you and
it's
two
me,
kids.
my
Uh-huh.
wife,
Uh-huh.
our two kids,
Uh-huh.
our two very large dogs.
Oh my
Um,
gosh.
they're Great Pyrenees,
Oh my
so
gosh. Huge
they're
dogs.
fairly large dogs, and our four cats
Oh
and
my
our bunny,
gosh.
all in
Okay.
the car. And we drove from Hutto, Texas, back to Eau Claire, straight because we have the animals. We couldn't spend too much time in a hotel, and
Yeah.
so we drove straight through. Basically,
So you and your
um,
wife are swapping
we
off
were
driving.
no, because of the health issues, she couldn't drive, so I drove the
Oh
whole
my
way.
gosh. So you're driving for like 20 hours.
Yes, super
Wow.
exhausted. We get to
Yeah.
the hotel, we go to check in, and the manager says that we can't, that
Oh my
that we
gosh.
cannot stay there.
And you have a
And the reason,
reservation.
we have a reservation,
Mm-hmm.
and the reason they gave us is said that they do not do business with locals. Because we'd never changed our driver's license, or our driver's license still said our Eau Claire address because that was our permanent address, because but
Yeah.
we were renting a home and living in a home in Texas for
Yeah.
5.5 months.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we are residents officially of Texas, but
Yeah.
we had two addresses. It's almost like
Yeah.
we had a summer home and a winter home or whatever,
Yes.
but we did not live in Eau Claire anymore. And no matter what kind of pleading, he was firm on his policy.
And that
And
is ridiculous. Like
yes,
what hotel doesn't do business with locals? That is, I'm just going to call BS right there.
and
That's not a
also,
thing.
how many locals book a room for 2 weeks? I understand if we're going to throw a big party, trash the place, maybe we'll stay there for a day and then like leave.
Yeah.
But it was a 2 week stay,
Okay.
and because of our needs, this is one of the places. It was the home too in Eau Claire. It was the only places that had like a kitchenette because we were at the
Yeah.
grocery shopping and all that
Yeah.
stuff. And so I asked
So
why they
it's
had the
like
policy.
it's late at night and you're trying to check in. And you walk
Yes.
in and this guy says you can't, no room at the inn.
Yes, and mentally, I'm not all there. I've been
Yeah, you're
driving for like
exhausted.
like
Yeah.
a day, day
And
and a
not
half.
just driving, but driving with a
Yes,
lot of family in the
and
car.
bags, right? So like we're all
And
cramped
bags
and
and
uncomfortable.
animals and
Yeah,
yeah.
and just like fueled on like
Yeah.
travel food, which is
Yeah.
not the best, and that makes
Awful.
me feel
Yeah.
icky.
Yeah.
Ugh. And I asked the question. I was like, "Why do you have the policy?" And he tried to back it up and saying, "Oh, because locals trash the place." And I said, "We're not local." We offered to show the paperwork that we're just closing on the house, show the
Yeah.
paperwork where we lived in Texas for the last 5.5 months. He didn't want to see any of it, didn't care about any of it. And then I said, well, how would we have known about this policy before we
Yeah.
got here?
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
he
You accepted
said,
the reservation.
yes. Reminds me of that Seinfeld sketch where, like, yes, you took the reservation, keeping
Yeah.
but and he said that basically the policy is not posted anywhere on the online that we would have seen while we booked it. And then while I was there, I was like, well, can you show me the policy? How do you have this policy? And he said,
Yeah.
oh, it was sent to me via email. I was like, well, can I see the email? He said, no. He refused to send it
He's,
to
I
me
mean,
or
he's
show
so
it to me.
clearly lying. Yeah.
Yeah. And here's the infuriating thing is that he was firm. I couldn't do anything. I can't bum rush him and like grab a room key.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so the worst thing I mean, the best thing I could do is just, we had to turn around and leave and find another place to stay. And then
But you
like
were
yeah,
you sent me a recording of this, Wesley, and you were
yeah,
so calm. You were so totally and perfectly calm. And making it very clear by the questions you were asking. Because it was like you said, well, can I talk to the manager? And he's like, well, I'm the manager, which he was
yeah,
acting like some other manager had
yeah,
made the policy.
yes.
Um, yeah, it was awful. Awful.
Yeah, he made it clear that he had the discretion whether or
Yeah.
not to adhere to the policy or not. And
Yeah.
he was choosing very specifically not to make any exceptions for us,
Yeah.
and and did not say I'm sorry at all. Didn't say really say
No.
I'm sorry for your no. It's just very
No, he didn't care.
it's a
It was
policy.
clear from
Yeah,
this he didn't care, at all. And it was also clear from this that it was racially motivated. I'm pretty sure that if a white resident of Eau Claire went to this hotel, they would have been able to stay.
I can't say it is, but Occam's razor is like, what else could it have been?
Yeah,
I
yeah,
don't. I
yeah.
mean, I don't
No,
know why
I
someone would
was,
be so firm with like turning down 2 weeks of
yeah.
occupancy for a hotel.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I was playing the recording that you sent me, and my husband was sitting there. I hope that's okay. And he was like, "Who is this racist asshole?" um, and my husband is like, not. He's one of those people he's an engineer, and he's a white guy, and he's really not. He really looks for data before he doesn't. That's not kind of an accusation. He easily. I've rarely heard him. He always asked for the data, and he had plenty of data from that call to say this was a racist policy. So I'm really sorry. And then it like must have cost you much more to have to find a place last minute for all the, for your whole
Oh,
family and all
yeah,
the animals.
absolutely. And I think it was close to $2,600 that we had to pay, which was significantly high,
Yeah. That's two
because
weeks.
of the
Yeah.
limited occupancy. And it's a small town. There's not
Yeah.
many that can check off the things that we needed in a place, because we were not just staying in overnight. We were needing to live there for the 2 weeks while we were effectively homeless, because we left our rental place. We were selling the place that we owned, and we
Yeah.
still have not closed on a place that we were moving to here in Roanoke. And so it was not only that, it was like the worst way to kick off
Yeah.
like a week. It tainted the whole experience about
Of
going
course
there.
it did.
Like, we
Of
were like,
course it
oh,
did.
we're moving, we're going to the place where we need to be, and we're gonna sell our house, and we're gonna start our new life. And it was like, oh gosh, this is like
Well,
the
thank
worst kickoff ever.
Yeah, yeah, no, I'm so sorry. And so this hotel was owned by Hilton, correct?
Yes, yeah. Home twos are owned by Hilton. It's a Hilton brand. I emailed Hilton, told them this, and they basically like, well, hotels can do what the manager can do whatever they want. Is basically the response I got.
That is, I mean, that's got to be illegal. Like a major part of what kicked off the civil rights movement was the right to stay in a hotel,
Mm-hmm.
and not
Yeah,
to have some racist hotel owner refuse admission, right?
but also, like, I asked Hilton, I said, can you get, I couldn't get a copy of this policy. Can you get a copy of this policy? How do I know this policy even exists? They can't, the manager couldn't furnish it or refused to furnish it. Can you, at least as Hilton, the parent company of this hotel, at least get a copy to show, or just some sort of proof that this even exists? And they were not unable to even get a copy. So I don't know, like,
There was no
why
policy. I
people
mean, this,
can
yeah.
do, until I see otherwise. They are acting with impunity, and they are doing it out of malice. And I don't understand how they can still, like, with a clean conscience, say that this is something that is okay.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think that so if we go back to the taxonomy, I would say the individual was prejudiced. I'm not going to call this bias. I'm going to call it prejudice. And because he had the power to prevent you from staying there, I'm going to call it discrimination. And because I think if you're gonna put your name, if you're Hilton and you're gonna put your name on these home twos, it is not okay to just wash your hands of the policies of the individual managers. Like, it is your job to make sure that these hotels don't discriminate. And they failed in that, I would argue.
Absolutely. I mean, they call the industry of running a hotel, um,
The
what do
hospitality
they
industry.
call it? Hospitality, right?
Yeah, that was not
Industry.
hospitality.
Yeah, that's a hostility.
It was
I guess we should
hospitality.
stop. We should stop making up words for this podcast.
But it's hostile. It is hostile.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry, and I would say you handled that as well as any human being could possibly handle it. And I think the story's not over. Like, you gave Hilton the opportunity to resolve it correctly and in private, and they did not take you up on that offer. So I think I think we've got to make this as public as possible.
Yeah, unfortunately, this is our modern society, is that this is the recourse of not just keeping it private, but letting people know, not just for me to get recompense, but also to let people know or alert them that this is a possible issue that they could run into. And
Yeah,
it,
if you really need a place to stay, don't stay at home too.
yeah, don't stay
Uh,
there.
yeah,
And no, even if you have a reservation, even if you could prepay, I
yeah,
think even offer to play like a bigger deposit or something like that to like assuage like any
yeah,
concern that we would do
yeah,
any damage. And that was still they weren't interested in worrying about that. So yeah, that if you yeah, do not bring your business there, or you will also be putting yourself at risk, because you don't, like, I was price gouged for like, and luckily I was in a place where I could afford it, but not everyone is as privileged as I am.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm so sorry. And I think the other thing that's so hard about the story is that you had to stay as calm as you did.
Yeah.
You didn't have, like, if that happened to me, I would go ape shit on this guy. Not that it would do any good necessarily, but even just the knowledge that I could
Right.
go ape
Because you
shit
would
on
feel
the
fully justified because it
I
is.
A, I would feel justified, and B, I mean, you probably would have felt justified too, but you wouldn't have
Yeah,
felt safe going a you know? And
exactly.
I think it is really important to feel safe, to be angry when you have what to be angry about, because if you don't feel safe to get angry, like, then what should be the energy that should be directed outward tends to turn inwards. And there are other
Hmm.
situations where that happens to me, but this particular situation is not one where that would happen to me as a white woman.
Yeah, it's cathartic to be able to like get angry and show anger.
Yeah.
It's a release mechanism. It's
Yeah.
like, why do I need to stick with this feeling? Why do I need to
Yeah.
take it and
Yeah.
hold it? Why can't I
Yeah.
just not give it to the person that's causing it?
Yeah.
And yeah, that is something that it took a while to kind of de-stress and find a way to relieve it, because then our like I think I started like snapping at my kids, snapping at
Yeah.
my partner, and then
Yeah.
we were just like in a bad mood because of this whole situation, and because we could not bring our grievance to the party that caused it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, let's bring it to that party. Let's bring it to them, because it's not okay what happened to you. I'm so sorry. Uh, anyway, we'll talk to Hilton. We'll talk to this guy.
Yeah, and if you know anyone at Hilton, if you're listening to this, you think that you can help or at least bring it to their attention, please do so. And it, it, it it would mean a lot to us, or at least to me specifically, to know that if we could at least make things better for the next person,
Yeah.
and see if they can revisit this policy. And there are times where it's a bad action and the action happened to me, but this type of thing is structural. So this is a
Yeah.
systematic structural problem that Hilton should address to make sure that this doesn't continue to happen to other people.
Yeah, because it will continue, and it'll be worse the next time. And eventually it'll be, not only bad for the next person, it'll be worse for Hilton if they don't get out ahead of it. I mean, that's
Yes.
why it's so important when you're in a position of power, and if you're managing a hotel or managing a chain of hotels, you're in a position of power, and you got to
Hmm.
make sure that it is your job and your responsibility to make sure that the right things and not the wrong things happen.
And your book talks a lot about having checks to power, and
Yeah.
unchecked power can allow you to do things that you're not allowed to do otherwise, because you're not accountable to any other group or person or even the people necessarily that you're there to serve. And I think this
Or
is
the
a really good
law.
example. Yeah, or the law. And it becomes so much easier when you abuse power one time to abuse it the second
The
time,
next time.
especially when you
Yeah.
know there's not going to be a consequence.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that at the very least, Hilton is responsible for putting policies in place that make sure that their hotel managers comply with the law. And
Hmm.
for them to say, "Oh, he can do whatever he wants, including breaking the law," and I think there's like this kind of like, "Oh, I'm so clever, I didn't break the law. I had this other policy." It's just BS. Like,
Yeah.
That's not going to work. So
Yeah,
anyway,
and
well,
no, yeah, it
go
sucks.
ahead, Wesley.
I was just say that Hilton is not even aware or have like a way of registering that there's the policy in place, and that they're totally ignorant about how the hotels are run are also like a very questionable.
Yeah, it's an abdication of responsibility. They're making money from this. They therefore have some responsibility. Well, Wesley, thank you for sharing the story. I hope that for folks listening, if you know people at Hilton and can help us escalate, that would be great. Because Hilton can, and I'm optimistic that they will do better. And I'm sorry that Wesley, I'm happy to take it to them. You shouldn't have to spend any more of your precious time on this. So sorry it
Yes, thank you
happened.
for letting me take a host privilege and like share my story.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you did. And thanks to everyone for listening. And we will see you next week.
Yes, bring your stories next time. We would love to hear
Bring
it.
your
Make sure,
stories.
yes, make sure you email us at hello at justworktogether.com. Is that the right email address?
Yep. Hello at
Yes.
justworktogether.com. All right.
Yeah. And yes, take care and we'll see you next time.
Take care. Thanks, Wesley. Bye.